This presentation is called Do Not Allow Others to Control Your Access to Information and Opportunities. But a better name for it could also be why you shouldn't rely on recruiters, job sites, and sort of other people when you're doing your search for a position. And this is, despite the title of this presentation, it's an extremely important one. It may not sound that interesting, but if you understand what this is about, it's really going to make a major difference in your career. So I've been in the legal placement business for about over 20 years. In October of 2000, there was a massive crash in the legal market. And what had happened is there'd been a lot of money that had gone into a lot of internet startups. And that financing suddenly went away because the markets realized that they were putting money into things that were unproven business models. And in many cases, companies that hadn't even generating revenue were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And so when the startups of those companies, there was all sorts of work being done, and generated. And when that work went away, law firms lost a ton of legal work that they built up, and they stopped hiring attorneys, and they started really laying them off in mass. And the worst affected were the corporate attorneys, but there'd been so much business and stuff that was coming out of all these internet companies that it really did a lot of damage to law firms. And there were tons and tons of layoffs all over the country, in New York, and lots of people lost their jobs and starting classes. Work weren't started, so they canceled their summer classes. They canceled their summer associate programs for the next year. It was really bad, and a lot of people may not remember it, but in some extent, it's similar to what happens when there's a pandemic, like you've seen. So it was very bad. And when I started speaking with all these attorneys that were having all these kind of sad stories, and I found it very distressing. And people were moving back in with their parents, giving up on their legal careers. And I hired several people actually in my office to be recruiters that had lost their jobs and that I'd known from, when I was practicing. At BCG, what I had done is the company had started in the late, 1999 or around then. And I had a massive database of law firms that I'd spent over a year developing. And just in Los Angeles, there were over 2,500 law firms that I'd identified to use in terms of that had different practice areas. And you should understand that every legal market in the country, whether it's Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or Philadelphia, all big cities have thousands of law firms, and people don't see that. They think of certain large law firms and they think that's all there is. But honestly, there may be high paying major law firms, but there's also a lot of smaller law firms that are breaking off from those large law firms all over the country on a daily basis. And then they're paying the associates that they bring with them and higher high market rates as well. It's very important that you understand that the market is huge and the number of opportunities out there are huge. But all you're seeing, many attorneys are seeing, are the well branded law firms. And so what happened to me was I realized when all these people were losing jobs that something about only about 20 of these 2,500 law firms were clients of the recruiting firm. And maybe it was a little bit more after a year, but it wasn't very large. So if you think of 21% of 2,500 law firms is about 20, 25 law firms. Literally, a recruiting firm is, representing the biggest firm, some in the city. And this was the company at the time. Obviously, are much different now. That's 1%. And that's pretty much what you get when you talk to most recruiting firms is they have unless they're a large kind of national firm, they have a very limited number of places that they can send you to. So you have to think about what this meant. So all these people were coming to me begging for jobs and I needing a placement. And out of those 2,500 law firms just in Los Angeles, and then it's all over the country, I can only help them with maybe 20. So what happens when you go to most recruiting firms is that they don't have jobs, whatever that limited number of people that they represent, they can't help you. And it's very important to understand that if you're using recruiters or a lot of methods to search jobs, you're really getting a limited understanding of the market. 2 decades later, this company has over 150 employees. And that number in Los Angeles is probably close to 800 or 1,000 law firms or something like that. We're getting a lot more. But at the same time, that was a result is I was only able to help them with those 20 firms. And because those 20 firms didn't have jobs, people that came to me were out of luck, and that made me feel very bad. So what happened is those firms would be absent from the search, and that obviously wasn't a good thing. So you have to think about it also. New York's even larger, maybe 4,000 and firms. And the thing I understood instinctively was even though all these law firms were laying people off, the firms where most of the activity was happening were in the large law firms. And I knew that, that with all these law firms in every city, there had to be opportunities. It's impossible that just because work stops in large law firms that people are laying people off that no one else is hiring. And when you're looking for an opportunity in the market, lots of attorneys will look around and they'll see that there's not jobs, or when they talk to people, they are recruiters and other people, they get very discouraging news and they conclude that, wow, this market's bad. I can't find any position. And that, in my opinion, as I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, is absolutely insane because in every single market, there's always lots and lots of opportunities. There are opportunities right now. And knowing what I know now, our company is making placements almost every day, and getting interviews, several interviews a day, because it doesn't matter what the market's, and right now happens to be a bad market, the worst it's ever been, probably. But we're still getting lots and lots of interviews because we realize that business is still going on in a lot of small firms and a lot of medium firms and even in large firms in certain practice areas. So concluding that there's not a lot of opportunities is really a very horrible mistake. And lots of people end up making that mistake in their search and in their careers because they're talking to the wrong people and they're using the wrong sources to try to find positions and the sense they're getting of the market. What you need to do, the greatest danger that you're going to face when you're looking for a job is believing that there's not positions out there and allowing others to influence what you think and what you believe. Because most attorneys and other people will only apply to a limited number of places and have access to a limited number of opportunities because they don't understand the number of opportunities out there. And just so you get a sense of where the market works, what happens in every large recession or any changing market is work will move from larger firms to smaller and medium-sized firms where the billing rates are lower. So those firms will start hiring a lot of people. And in addition, that work will also move to larger markets the work will move from larger markets to smaller markets. So there'll be opportunities there. So every time something bad happens and the market gets bad, there's always going to be opportunities in different types of firms. And firms with higher overhead, which are larger firms, typically have to keep paying that overhead. They have pensions sometimes and all sorts of things that they're paying. And so it's much harder for them to start hiring when the economy's bad. So you can't listen to other people many times in your job search. What I'm going to try to, stress to you and explain to you today is how to find information that's out there, where to look and find information about jobs, and then how to really know what's going on. When an attorney is in law school, it's a perfect example. They may only be exposed to the firms that are doing on-campus interviews at their school. And an example would be like if you go to school, say in Michigan, and say you go to a local law school in Michigan, I don't know, Wayne State, which it's a good law school, and I know people that have gone there. What's going to happen is you're going to be exposed to law firms that are local to Detroit and Michigan, and that like the school and have alumni that went there, and you're going to be exposed to on campus, and they're going to have relationships with those firms, and so you're going to literally be limited to whatever is going on with Detroit geographic area and maybe some areas outside there. But in reality, if you have done well there, or you have a specialized skill, like maybe you have science background and you could be a patent attorney and all sorts of things, the whole country is open to you. And maybe the Detroit economy is depressed when you're looking for jobs. And so they're literally the whole country's open. And it's an ABA approved law school, and there's all sorts of things you can do. But you may conclude that the market's bad based on what you're seeing in Detroit. And you really need to understand that the conducting extensive searches and understanding kind of all what the market's like out there is crazy. And in Michigan, for example, you may go to University of Michigan, and in that case, all sorts of national places are applying. But still, you may only be exposed to the largest employers and not the smaller ones. The idea of any type of search and finding information is to know where the opportunities are and how to go after them. So I want to tell you a quick story, and I'm going to tell you several stories about to make this point. A few years ago, I was working with a graduate of a top probably three law school, and he was fired from a position. And he lost his job because he felt that, I think he was right based on what he told me, that his law firm had been overbilling a client and were asking him to do unnecessary work. I guess there was a solution to a problem. He found it very quickly, but they kept asking him to look at something that was unrelated and basically to drive up the bill. And he confronted the attorney with it, and they decided that this person wouldn't play the game, and he lost his job. But that's one thing too about working in a law firm, whether you're regardless of your level, most law firms, if you don't have business, they want you to be a soldier and just do what you're told and not question it. And so that's a piece of job search advice. You have to, unless something completely unethical is happening, you really have to let the law firm make the decisions, or the employer, what regardless of what kind of employer, about what you're doing. So this recruiter or this attorney ended up calling attorneys all over. Okay. He ended up calling attorneys all over, or recruiters all over Washington, D.C. And every single one of those recruiters told him that they didn't have any openings. He was only 6 months out of law school. He didn't have any formal experience, and he felt terrible, and he had very limited amount of experience and very confused. And the fact is that most law firms are not actually seeking attorneys with only 6 months of experience. So recruiters are all telling him that he was out of luck. And despite the fact there are thousands of law firms in Washington, D.C., he really had no way of getting a position and was very discouraged by what he was hearing. So I told this attorney that I didn't see any issues with him getting a position, but I would need to look at a lot of law firms for him. I told him that we had to shop his candidacy around, and we had to find places where he could apply that didn't have openings, but that would value his law school and the limited amount of experience he had. Put together a list of probably over 50 law firms, and I went out and I marketed them. And within a few weeks, I got him a position and several interviews. And the interview I got was at, and the job was probably the top law firm for the type of work he did in Washington, D.C. He ended up getting a really good position. And before he found me, he was actually thinking about giving up on the practice of law and very discouraged. And so the idea here was he was listening to recruiters telling him they didn't have any opportunities. He was discouraged, thinking about giving up on the practice of law because he was fired 6 months into his practice. And by looking at a lot of firms that didn't have openings for an attorney with 6 months, he was able to get into one of the best law firms in Washington, D.C. And other recruiters would not talk to him and told him they couldn't help him because they were under the belief that anybody with 6 months of experience can't get a job. And I just might as well tell you right now, because it is important. At BCG, we get people with no experience, jobs and offers. We get all sorts of people because the market is fluid. There's always someone that's going to be interested in you and want to hire you. So back to what happened in 2000. So the legions of laid off and people started piling up around, and I saw so many people were calling. It was literally like you'd hang down the phone, there'd be another call and another call and another call. We had just a few recruiters in the office. And so what happened is I decided that the only way to get these attorneys jobs was if I was able to go and build lists of these firms for these attorneys and help them contact these people. And so what I did is I invited everybody into my office that was looking for a job, and I ended up helping them send out their resumes to most all the firms in each city they wanted to work in that had firms in their matching practice area, and told them it was the best way for them to get a position. And it actually worked very well. And people were able to, almost all those people that contacted lots and lots of firms, got positions. It didn't matter what practice area they were in, even though corporate was in bad shape. It didn't matter what law school they went to. If they went to a third or fourth year law school, that didn't matter. Everybody got positions. And something you need to understand is that the legal market is a market, and there's always going to be someone who's interested in hiring you and giving you opportunities because law firms need people in order to make money. And different law firms have different amount of work. Different companies have different amount of work. Those mailings that we're not just the law firms, we also get them to companies and government offices. But the idea is that if you know how to market yourself and you just get out there and market yourself, you're going to get lots and lots of interviews and offers. Everybody that ever does this does. And it's extremely important. What I saw when this happened was a really cool thing. People that had been formerly depressed and sad about their prospects became empowered, and they tried all these other methods, jobs. They'd network, they'd use job sites, they'd use recruiters, they'd done everything that they could. And suddenly their lives had been changed by contacting tons and tons of employers that didn't even have opening. It made a huge and a major difference. And there's nothing more dangerous to your success as an attorney than limiting the number of opportunities that are out there. You need to understand and have access to everything that's out there. And the only way that you can do that is by proactively marketing yourself and learning how to do that. In every economy, there's lots and lots of busy law firms. The largest law firms are not always busy. Sometimes they are. If the economy is terrible, what happens generally is things like litigation will pick up. Corporate work will go to a lot of smaller firms. And even in bad economies, what happens is companies that are having issues may have to sell or merge or issue debt. You probably, in a bad economy, you'll see headlines every single day about this company raised this amount of money. This company took a loan for this amount of money. And what's happening is that there are attorneys doing that work. In many cases, the law firms want to save money, but and give it to other people. But at the same time, the companies want to save money and give it to smaller law firms. But the work does move to smaller law firms and it does move to smaller markets many times, but not always. But the point is that there's always going to be work, and depending on the market, regardless. Now, one thing that's also important to understand is that most people that are looking for jobs, they seem to believe that the law firms are going to be able to put their jobs out there. Companies will always put their jobs out there. They have the work, and those are the only places they should be looking for. And it's very important to understand that with thousands of law firms in most major cities, law firms, not all of those law firms, the majority of them don't have in-house recruiting departments, and they're not going to spend a lot of time looking for attorneys even when they need them. Their expertise is in practicing law. It's not in recruiting. And an attorney that's billing out at $750 an hour maybe consider themselves too busy to even look at resumes or to post ads online or to call recruiters looking for people. They're in the middle of very stressful cases that are work or transactions that are consuming their time and that are bringing in revenue to the firms. And the last thing in the world they want to do is worry about recruiting. But the thing is law firms have so much work coming in that they often don't take the work they have because they don't have people. So they may have work that they could do, but they just aren't doing it. It's going undone. And so what I realized that when I did all this work is I extended also, if you think about the number of companies also in a market, there's typically 3 times as many companies that hire attorneys as there are companies that hire law firms that hire attorneys. They may not hire as many attorneys, but there's that many more. So there's huge numbers of government offices, nonprofits, public interest organizations, and other people that also hire attorneys. And the list of people that need attorneys to work for them is absolutely huge. It's practically endless. And when I'm out, regardless of where I am, I could be at the beach or who knows, I meet people that need attorneys to work for them on an ongoing basis. Company owners, very wealthy people with home offices, people running small businesses. Lots and lots of people need attorneys and they need them on an ongoing basis. So with so many people interested in hiring you, you have to wonder why. Most attorneys only get one job when they're looking for, or law students hardly get, most of them don't get a lot of jobs. You have to wonder why it's difficult to find jobs for most people and why a search can take a long time. Because then you need to understand that when you're looking for a job is there's all sorts of people that can hold you back from actually getting the jobs you want. And job sites are going to control the flow of information to you, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. The main thing to understand about job sites is job sites are only showing you jobs that the employers are paying to post there. That's a very limited number of employers. That means that, and I'm going to show you today, I'll also show you the list of how many job sites there are where there's job postings. But the number is just huge. It's absolutely loony how many job sites. There's thousands of them. At Law Crossing, we look at over 4,000 job sites to find attorney jobs. And just think about that. 4,000 job sites have attorney jobs on them. First of all, you don't have the time to look at all those. The reason there's 4,000 is because there's 4,000 different businesses out there trying to get employers to pay to post jobs. Most employers aren't going to post their jobs on 4,000 job sites. They may post them on one or two. They're not always posting jobs. They're just, a lot of times they'll just post them on their own website. Recruiters are controlling the flow of information too. Recruiters have to have a relationship with a law firm in order for them to send you there. So that to some extent may limit the number of law firms you end up looking at. If you network, the strength of your network is going to control the flow of information to you. I did a presentation last week about networking and how important it is. But something to understand about networking is that your ability to get information is dependent on how large and how significant your network is. And so you absolutely do whatever you can to control to have a large network. But if you don't, then that's going to hurt you. Another thing that controls information for you is rumors and speculation among peers and others. They're going to control the flow of information to you. So you may simply believe that the market's very bad and not go out and seek information because you believe that the market's bad. And that's, organizations will control the flow of information. There may be jobs where you're working, or you may have, you just don't know your relationship with various organizations. And I'm not saying you should go about this being paranoid, but what I am saying is there's lots and lots of information out there. It's just that you don't have access to all. And my advice in terms of the best way to get it is to contact employers, obviously, and with mass mailing and other targeted methods to find information. But you're just not going to get, if you're using a job site to run your search, you're not going to get all the information. If we're using most recruiting firms, they're not legal placement firms. BCG is a legal placement firm, but most recruiting firms only have a limited number of relationships, and that's controlling the flow of information. So you need to always be aware that you need to be very careful in terms of the amount of information you're looking at. Job sites are only showing you the jobs that employers are willing to pay hundreds of dollars. And so you just need to really understand that and where that information is coming from. And same thing with recruiters. That's going to limit things. And most recruiters will only work with large law firms. I hate to say it, but it also takes a lot of work. In order for us at BCG, for example, to have as many opportunities we have, it takes over 150 people to find that. That's a lot of organization. It's a lot of expense. It's a lot of, research, and it's the ability to even do that research, which I have since I'm an attorney and the people working here are, but not everybody wants to put in that sort of effort. And like I said earlier, your network is going to control the flow of information, and you may not have the time to have developed a good network. That's an important. And in terms of your network, networks are an interesting thing. Many networks people in your network may or tell you about the information, or they may not. So you have to build up goodwill sometimes to get information about opportunities. And like I said earlier, many times rumors and speculation are also going to control the flow of information. And this belief is going to, severely limit the number of opportunities you have. Many people are very closed off, and they get psyched out, and they're impressionable. And most of us are to some extent. But if you surround yourself with people that are thinking negatively about the market, that's going to have a negative impact. And you have to understand the power also. Information is extremely important. So if you look at organizations like Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn, the reason that they're so powerful is because they control information. Facebook stands in the middle, controls how you your friends, groups, and others, and it becomes an advertiser-sponsored event. And the same thing about Google. Google controls the sort of information, and the same thing with LinkedIn. If those organizations don't like you, or they don't like the kind of information you're putting out, or you don't do whatever, they will ban sites. Google will ban sites from its platform, and Facebook will, ban people. And there's just all sorts of things about information. So it's important to understand that if you're relying on others for information, you're never going to have access to all the opportunities. And you need to really understand where that information is, how to find it, and how to go after it. And just really realizing that no matter where you are, consider the story I told you earlier about a student at Wayne State and just being limited by what's going on in that market. It's not that the school's doing anything wrong, but it's just that's how most people end up conducting their searches. So I want to tell you a funny personal story, and it's somewhat related to this. It really relates to getting access to information and understanding once you do get access to that information, what that information will mean and how it can change how you see yourself. Not too long ago, I was speaking with a partner who is in a major law firm in Texas, and it was about potentially moving firms and that sort of. And he'd been in an unhappy marriage for some time, and mentioned that to me, and I mentioned that I was also going through divorce. And back when I was growing up, at least, people tended to get married very young, and especially in Texas, got married at the age of 19, and had never been exposed to really dating sites or other ways to find people, except I think he met his wife when he was a freshman in college or something. And I'd pretty much have been single since I was or never been single since I was 19 years old. He told me he'd been very depressed when his divorce had started and believed that it was going to be tough for him to meet people, that he didn't have a lot of time to get out and network. He wasn't in school anymore. And he'd been in this kind of unhappy relationship where he'd been just talked to very negatively for a few decades and made to feel that he was undesirable and not a good person, didn't make enough money, worked too much, and just all these kind of criticisms that he received. And it made him feel very upset about himself, depressed. And he didn't really know what he was going to do, but he didn't think he had as much worth as he really did have. And that's the thing too. When you're not getting positive feedback from the legal market, when you're applying to jobs and so forth, you may believe that you don't have enough worth, but the point is you may be going about things in the wrong way. And this particular guy was living in a suburb outside of Dallas, I believe, and certainly didn't have a large people and wasn't meeting people, and really thought he would be single for a long time. And he thought that maybe he would, be meeting people through his church or friends. It could take a while, and he just didn't know. So someone he knew or he met for somewhere told him that maybe he should look at some dating sites. And he did. He joined a few, and I guess one was particularly good. I don't remember what it was, but within a few weeks, he started realizing that there were just tons and tons of people that were interested in. And he started going out on all these dates, and there were so many. He was going out on so many dates, and people were proactively contacting him that he started finding reasons not to go out with people and just eliminate them because he had so much people so interested in. And the more he got to know people and the more he saw that there were people out there in the market, the more he realized that he was worthwhile, that he was someone that people liked and could like. And he also realized that he got married very young and had never really been that compatible with his wife, and that he actually had access to countless opportunities to find someone and be happy with them. And so it actually changed his whole kind of outlook. He became, instead of depressed and like feeling bad about himself, he became very happy, and he realized the value, and he didn't have to tolerate being treated poorly or taken for granted or feeling sorry for himself. And having access to all this information about people that were interested in him personally made him feel very good. I work in other countries, and so as well as the US, and so I was going to India on a trip for work, and I was in the middle of divorce, and he told me the story a day before I got on a plane. So I was in an airport, just in a lounge waiting, and on my laptop, really know what to do. And when I was checking email, and I got an email from my thought of, so I downloaded a dating app out of curiosity, and then I uploaded a picture and wrote a little bit, and then I forgot about it. Literally, I got on my plane like a half hour later, and got on this 15-hour flight to Dubai, where I was planning for a 2-day stopover. So I got off in Dubai. It was early in the morning there, and I turned on my phone, and or no, it was late. It was like 5 o'clock, and I hadn't been there for more than 30 minutes, and I started getting all these messages from, people that were based there as flight, stewardesses and all sorts of things. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that if I wanted to, I would have been able to meet someone in Dubai. There was something called geo-targeting, I think, on the dating site. And I just couldn't believe it. I think I must have received like 25 messages, 30 minutes. And I guess must be a real active dating scene there in Dubai, which I certainly never thought. But had I been living in Dubai, I probably would have decided the best way for me to meet people would be to join some organizations. Maybe I would have joined a tennis club or a gym, and maybe some business, like legal organizations, and gone to events and made friends with, most likely made friends with males, and then people through that. And it would have taken months to meet so many people. The people that I met would have been very limited. It would have been a very limited pool, and it might not have been someone that I was actually compatible with. If I joined a legal organization of attorneys from the US and Dubai, there might have been 3 or 4 eligible women that I would have, and I would have had to rely on the organization's schedule, and I would have had to join several organizations, and I may never have met people. It could have taken me years. So if we think about that, I never really would have met people. I never would have realized how much value I had, and it would have been not a great thing. So it's like this with law students and attorneys. They may not be in a situation similar to the Texas attorney and myself in a personal life, but they really may not realize, and you may not realize your desirability and how desirable you really are. You may exist in this sort of paradigm where you think that because you're applying to certain types of employers and certain places, that you're not desirable. And that's insane. It means if a recruiter can't help you, that's just because the recruiter may not have an opportunity. An employer in a job site's not hiring you. That's just because there could be multiple reasons. They could have already got plenty of applicants, or you may not be qualified enough, or who knows. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of opportunities. Most attorneys and law students, they see a very limited amount of information that's available to them and what they can achieve. And you absolutely need to understand, like I understood when I landed in Dubai, or like I understood when I saw all these attorneys that did these mailings get positions. You absolutely need to understand that there's way more opportunities out there than you can possibly ever be aware of. And there's just tons and tons of opportunities. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to find them. One of the things I want to talk about just very briefly is the difference between legal recruiters and legal placement. And a typical legal recruiting firm, like I said, is going to have only the largest law firms with openings. And these are going to be the firms that everybody has heard of. And they may have a few relationships with a few smaller firms, and they'll send you to those firms. But for the most part, they're only going to have relationships with the largest law firms. And that means that, like I told you earlier, out of 2,500 law firms in a city like Los Angeles, there may only be 20 opportunities or 30 opportunities. It's just too much work to monitor all the potential openings in the market. And because of that, the typical attorney using a legal recruiting firm is only going to be exposed to the largest law firms that everyone knows about anyway. And if the recruiting firm doesn't have those openings, then the candidate's going to be out of luck. And that limitation is one reason that the kind of the practice of legal recruiting isn't something I like. What I like is legal placement. And that means everybody comes to BCG, for example, will we typically have at least 6 people researching and finding opportunities, updating databases for every recruiter in the company. So, that there's at least people at all times assigned to do research and stuff for each recruiter. So there's no reason that most people can't do that same research themselves, and you certainly can. But what I've realized over 2 decades of doing this is that if you do research and find opportunities, you're going to really uncover a lot of stuff. It's going to change your career and your life because there's so much out there. It, you just don't want to be held back by job sites or recruiting firms or anybody that's trying to control the amount of information or give you the sense that there's not a lot of information out there. And this happens to so many people in the course of their job search. So I got an interesting story about when I was younger. I worked for an attorney that apparently had never lost a case. And that's what his secretary told me and other people in the firm said. But he didn't brag about it or anything. He was just more academic than anything. And he had very famous clients. And a lot of times he would be called when they were accused of doing bad things or something very bad happened. Just something that would make headlines and then they would personally be sued. And so what he would do is he would get these fact patterns and he would just start researching. And I worked with him once on one particular case for several weeks. And I was just writing all these memos and doing all these research. And I have all these piles of research around my office. And it was crazy, like how much research and work was going into these cases. And we wouldn't just look at what the case law said. We'd look at the law and like what the legislatures were debating in terms of what the law meant when they were enacting it. So we could argue that the case law was wrong or whatever. And we interview people and there was so much work that went into it. And there was always like a limitless budget because this was very bad stuff. But what would happen is every time I worked on a case with this guy, something would happen where we would always find like a very small point or something in the case where, that the research would uncover something where we would win, where whenever the reason that we were being sued was, there was always some angle or some sort of way of looking at it. If you did enough research and worked hard enough, you could always win cases. And that to me was incredible. I realized that the more work you did on something, the better it was as a litigator. And so when I got done working with him and I'd spent just looking at the minutiae of a case, like you just go so deep. Most people get a case and they'll just respond reflexively, well, this is the law, this is this. And that's how most attorneys practice law. But if you're like an extremely good litigator or an extremely good researcher and stuff, you will look at things in a lot of detail and you'll understand every angle of the case and everything about it. And there's a famous story of an attorney in Chicago named Phil Corboy, and I interviewed him when I was in law school. But what he used to do is he'd take every paper in a case and he would have his secretary and everybody dump it in a jacuzzi in his apartment and the water tower place. And then he would he would pick out every paper that was, even if it was mixed up, and he would read it. And then he would figure out where it went and make sure he understood. And the idea was he wanted to understand every case inside. The idea with you looking for a job is you need to be able to do research to find places that you can work. You need to be able to understand, that the more research you do, the better off you're going to be. And like I said earlier, small law firms are breaking off the big law firms almost every day around the United States and meet people. Attorneys are joining firms every day, and those firms need to hire people to work for them. And small law firms need people without business, or medium firms do. And it's just that people are leaving firms and vacancies every day. And the market is so dynamic. Just take the idea of 4,000 law firms in New York. At 4,000 law firms in New York, every week people are leaving and getting hired and new work is coming. So if you take about 4,000 and say three or four, maybe say 10 things happen in the law firm every week, 10 new types of some new work comes in, leaves, someone's hired. So if that is happening, say 10 things are happening at each of those 4,000 law firms, some more than others, that's 40,000 things that are happening in those 40,000 law firms every week that could impact whether or not they need people. And you have absolutely no way of understanding that. You can read all the news periodicals you want, look at all the job sites, but you're not going to understand that unless you affirmatively reach out and contact those employers. The other thing too is in recessions, law firm or companies a lot of times will bring work in house and giving it to law firms to save money, and maybe they'll hire people. So there's such an astonishing amount of work in the market that you can find that if you have the skill. But if you don't look for that work and just you look the normal way that people look, you're not going to find it. So have to do research and you have to use sources out there. Some sources would just be BCG, we list firms. We certainly don't list every law firm. At Law Crossing, we list a lot of firms, but we certainly don't list every law firm. Martindale lists firms, but they don't list every law firm. Martindale will list the people that pay to be there, which is fewer and fewer people. And BCG, we only list like the best law firms. In Law Crossing, we list a lot of firms, but we certainly don't list every firm there either. So you have to be using and looking at lots and lots of resources for firms. You can find firms by doing searches on Google. So, an example of a search would be top litigation boutiques in Palo Alto. If you want to work in Palo Alto, or top litigation firms or litigation firms in Palo Alto, sometimes even just Google can pull up a lot of results. FindLaw has lots of jobs. Now, after this, I'm going to be posting a list of our attorney directories, and I'm also going to be posting a list of places where you can, bar associations are the places that will have jobs. And I'll also post a list of 4,000 job sites. I don't expect you to look at all the job sites. I don't expect you to look at all of the bar associations, except ones that are local to you. But you need to, and I'll also post a list of other associations for you as well. But you need to get out there and look at every type of source of jobs you possibly can. And it's not just going to be places that are listed. You need to do research to find them. And presumably, most people that go to law school learn to have legal skills in law school. You learn to do research and you learn to find information. And this particular type of information, if you think about the thousands of hours you've spent in libraries and so forth doing research and looking up case law, none of that information is going to change your life. But if you learn how to do research to find law firms in different markets or companies in your market, you'll find an astonishing number of places you can work. I go to law libraries at least, once a year, and I look at all of the directories there. And sometimes it's almost because I love information so much, I almost get to the point where I'm like hyperventilating and need to sit back because there's directories of in-house attorneys, there's directories of associations, there's directories of counsel of patent. There's so many different types of directories and sources of information out there that for me to just list them would be take a ton of time. And there's new ones all the time. One I do like actually now is Google. I mean, you can find a lot of things on there. They do a very good job doing that. And I certainly we spend a ton of time building our database at BCG because it's and Law Crossing because it's a business. But at the same time, there's so many things out there. And you need to know also how to, as an attorney, make a case for yourself. Now, I will be talking in subsequent, modules about how to get yourself and how to do it. And all we've been talking about the past several weeks is we've been talking about, how to find this information, because information really, in my opinion, is the most important thing for you in terms of looking for a job and finding the information of opportunities. Once you have access to information, you can get out there and regardless of your interviewing skills and stuff, things are generally going to work out because you're going to find the right person that matches the kind of person you are or the right kind of group. But at the same time, we will cover that information is the most important thing. You need to use your research skills. And what do attorneys do? The most basic thing an attorney's taught in law school is how to write an appellate brief. An appellate brief is going and doing all the research, and then you also argue the appellate brief and then making an argument for whatever the side of the case it is. That's what you need to do with yourself. That's the most basic skill. Every attorney has it, but you need to get out there and you need to research all of the firms in the given market to do what you want. I like Martindale, by the way, because of the way they break down practice areas, but I don't like the fact that they're also limiting the information. Martindale's only showing the people that are paying to be there. Okay. The same thing with FindLaw, same thing with a lot of job sites. All these people out there you need to understand are giving you biased information. Now, if you lose an out guide, that's also people that are paying to be there. If you're interviewing only on campus, your law school, law firms need to pay to interview on campus. All these things are limiting your information. And I don't like it. I understand business is business. Recruiters are limiting your information by the only showing you jobs are their clients. Job sites are limiting your information by only showing you places that are paying to be there. Newspapers are by the same things. All these people are limiting your information. I want you to just put yourself in the shoes of actually being a lawyer. And if you've gone to law school, you've been taught how to represent people and are being taught, and that's what attorneys, you're being taught to represent people and get them results. Think about if someone came to you and you're just an attorney, but instead of being an attorney telling them about whatever your practice area is, environmental law or something, and them a result, you have to get them a result in terms of the job market. You have to really show them what's out there, and you're representing them and taking them under your wing as your client, make them a job. Would you send them just a few openings if you're getting paid for your job, or would you go and research every possible place that could work, every possible directory where there's information? Would you go and do all the work and the research you needed to? And the thing is you would do that research and you would do it as an attorney because it was necessary. And you would do it because you needed to guarantee that the person was going to get a result. You would find every possible place to work and you would be as thorough as possible, you would prepare a report, and it would have all that information. And when you had all that information, the person would get a result. And that's exactly what that I do at BCG and what we've been doing for over 20 years is we use our research skills as attorneys to get people to identify every possible law firm, every possible place the person could work, and a very good job. And the only thing that's holding you back from getting the position that you want or getting any attorney getting the position they want is honestly, it's just not looking at more places, not putting yourself out there. Absolutely insane. Not doing more research and not really understanding what's out there in the market. Attorneys are making in their careers all sorts of assumptions that limit them. They believe that only large law firms pay well, so that's where they need to apply. Not true. Lots and lots of small law firms pay even better than major law firms in many cities. They have bonuses that are more. They pay people in different manners. They may pay them by the hour. I had an attorney once who was talking to a firm, and she thought the firm, by the looks of it, would pay $60,000 or $70,000 a year. It turned out she was billing they were giving her half of whatever she billed out for, and she billed out at $500 an hour. So she was making $250 an hour. And her first year there, she worked over 2,000 hours. You cannot take any of this stuff at face value. There's going to be opportunities in small law firms that are going to pay just as much as large law. Many people believe that law firms will not consider them if they apply there and there's no openings. That is also insane. Okay. Because a law firm is a business. Say that just put yourself in the shoes of a law firm or an attorney running a law firm. Say you have a law firm and it's just you sitting there and you have all these clients coming in that need you to help them get financing because their businesses are crashing because there's a pandemic. And so you have to go get them financing and they're happy to pay you $750 an hour to do it, but you simply don't have the time to do all this work. Now, if you get a letter in the mail from an attorney that says, hello, I have a lot of experience doing finance. Oh, and I'm just got laid off from this huge law firm because they don't have any work. And if I got on a resume like that, I would bring that person in a second and I would tell them, I can't believe you're making $200,000 a year, but I'll give you whatever until we get this done. You might even make more. That's great. That's how it works. So you just need to understand that there's opportunities out there like that, and you need to be of a state of mind where you can find it. That attorney that had all that work getting financing, as an example, he may not know or she may not know how to go out and find attorneys to do the work or have any idea. But if someone targets them and finds them by doing research of who does the kind of work I do in this city or market and approaches them, you're going to get a job. Many people believe that there's no opportunities in that market. Right now, the city of New York is shut down because of the pandemic. Nothing's going on. People aren't going into work and all sorts of things. And yet, yesterday we made a placement of a litigator
And we also made a placement of a banking attorney. This is just yesterday, a BCG attorney search. And those people are working from home. And we also got a couple other interviews. This is in the middle of a market. And it's not like that's supposedly the worst it's ever been and shut down. There are opportunities everywhere, no matter what the market is, because firms have work no matter what the market's in. You cannot say there's no work in your market because there are attorneys doing work. If you drive around to the nicest neighborhoods in any city in the United States, there's going to be attorneys living there. And those attorneys have work. There's work everywhere. Okay. I just want you to make sure you understand that. And I really knock that in. There's work everywhere. It doesn't, many people believe that law firms only hire people that are more junior, more senior, or with different backgrounds. Not true. Okay. Place attorneys that don't have any experience. We place attorneys that are senior and don't have any business all the time. Why do law firms hire attorneys that are senior with business? They hire them because they need senior people to do the work and they have more senior people work than they can themselves. People hire all sorts of people. It just, you have to use your research skills to go after and find those positions. And the number of assumptions that are holding most attorneys back in their job search is just nothing short of amazing. And most careers are limited because people do not believe in what is possible and what happens when you get out there and market yourselves correctly. And really trying to emphasize this as much as I possibly can. But I want you to understand there are tens of thousands of law firms in the United States. There are hundreds of thousands of companies, tens of thousands of government offices. There are so many possible places you can work. It's astonishing. And I'm going to go over more of those because I don't want to give too much time, and I'll go over those in subsequent weeks. But you're holding yourself back if you're going out with that. And you also need to be very smart, and you need to realize how information is being controlled all around you. And you need to question, why am I getting access to information in the way I am? Is this really true? And so forth. And started my career at a law firm called Manual. And I was speaking with a partner in a firm just a couple days ago. And he was telling me about something that Bill Urquhart did. And Bill Urquhart was one of the founders of the firm and very smart, was in charge of recruiting and business development. And he said that what happened in many of the law schools that Quinn wanted to interview at each year was that the schools would rotate, the best law schools, Harvard and so forth, rotate when the firms could interview. One year they could interview in September, and the next year would be October, and the next year would be November, and then it would go back to September. And it might have been late August, September, October. I don't remember the exact months. They were over 3 months. And obviously the benefit if you interview first, and you interview the best students and the ones that you want the most is you can make them offers and they'll accept, and then they're out of the market. And then the people that come in later get the people that are left over. Not necessarily the worst thing, but if you have access to the best trees, the best law students first, it's good. So for years, Quinn just went along a docile way, being controlled by when they got access to students and just doing that. And just kind of like lemmings and the way most people get access to information. And then it occurred to Bill Urquhart that the only students they really wanted anyway were students that had gotten on the law review or maybe gotten some prizes their first year, which the school would announce for the best academic performance. And so all they need to do is just go to the online and see who was on law review and send letters to them at the law review office. And then maybe contact them through LinkedIn and invite them to a cocktail reception and a meeting and to do some interviews in a hotel. And so they would just interview them before any of the other firms even showed up on campus, make their pitch, and get the best students every year. And stop using on-campus interviews, which the schools charge thousands of dollars for, which isn't that worry when, but stop doing on-campus interviews entirely and got the best students. So being very smart about information and realizing that they weren't limited by who the school said they could interview what time. They could just do whatever they wanted. And you can do the same thing. You cannot allow others to control the access of information, your access to information. So what you need to do, and I've said this before, if you're in the market, you need to apply to places without openings. You need to do this. You should not be controlled by the idea that you need to apply to places that have openings. You need to do your research and find every company, every law firm, every government office, in your market that you want to work in, whatever market, and apply to. And I've said this before, but I'll tell you, if you're writing a company, you write to the CEO, and the resume will always make it to the CEO. And if it doesn't make it to the CEO, it will be given to, it will go to the CEO. And if the CEO doesn't look at it, it will be passed from the CEO's office to HR, and people will know it's from the CEO and will look at it in a serious way. The other way you can apply is most law firms will list their HR contacts or who to send your resume to on their website. If they don't, then send it to an attorney that's the most senior attorney in your practice area you want to work at, or one of the founders of the firm if they're still alive. Works too. Yeah. The thing is, none of these people need to post jobs online. We don't need to have openings. People love it when people reach out to them. This is especially true with smaller law firms. I've hired people before that have just walked in my office and said they wanted to talk about a job, or had just mailed letters, just proactively mailed letters. If if you apply to a law firm also, most law firms don't receive a lot of applications. It's a funny story, but when I applied to Quinn Emanuel, the firm was only like 40 attorneys at the time. And Bill Urquhart got my application that I mailed in, and he called me on the phone and he said, "How did you know about us? How did blah, blah, blah?" It's like he was flattered that he got a letter in the mail. And this is before the firm exploded and turned into 1,000 attorneys a long time ago when I worked. The point is, law firms love getting applications, especially smaller ones that don't hear from people. And it's a big deal to them. They have an opportunity to hire someone. It gives them validity. There's all sorts of things about it, especially contact. The best way to reach a law firm is to send a letter through the mail. You put it on nice paper, iced by heavy cotton paper, and nice envelopes so it comes and looks good. You make sure that everything's professionally formatted and it looks very professional. And they're going to take note of it. And the thing about letters is when you get a letter in the mail, like when I get letters, I hardly ever get letters anymore. But if I get a letter about something that's interesting or a resume, it sits on my desk while I think about it. And so it's constantly reminding me of it and I'm thinking about it. If you just send an email, it just goes into a folder somewhere on someone's computer and it's often deleted. And you don't know if they can get it. It's fun. People can walk a printed resume into another person's office. It's harder to discard. Spending the time to send letters, I'm telling you, most people don't do this. But if you do, it's going to change your job search quite a bit. And it's something you're less likely to get attention if you send your materials through other means. Sending a letter is typically the best way. At BCG, for example, we always send letters via email, fax, printed letter. It's something we always do. We send them in different ways and it can pay huge dividends. So if someone gets a fax or a letter, it's going to make a much bigger difference than if they just get an email. And so you should always send letters to law firms for your application material. So in conclusion, the biggest thing I want to say to everyone is it's very important to do whatever you can to get in touch with as many law firms and employers as you possibly can when you're doing your search. And you need to reach out in a lot of different ways and not be controlled by information that you may be coming through other points. I think today what we covered is very important. So thank you.